Hi, everybody, and welcome back to the Survivor 50 Wish List, an off-season Survivor podcast series that is going to bring together a list of who could and should come back for Survivor 50. My name is Mike Bloom, and we are unearthing a season much like the pet cemetery that resides outside certain caves in Thailand for Survivor Thailand, the fifth season of Survivor, and you can't spell 50 without 5. And we shall see how many of these season 5 contestants will fit into season 50. Of course, I am not alone here. I cannot talk about Thailand without this. I would say Thai man, but that does not feel to be an appropriate descriptor in so many ways. But of course, you have heard him on a recurring basis covering Survivor on the YX Lost podcast, but perhaps more applicable to the season we're talking about today, formerly of Reality News Online. It is the incomparable David Bloomberg. Hey, David.
Hi, thank you. Thank you.
So, just as a quick review, this will be the last episode of the first week of podcast. So, this will be the last
Okay.
time I'm doing any of these disclaimers. But for those that happen to fancy in during the Thailand portion of this entire project, first off, good for you. You may be some of the most unique people I've ever heard of in my life. But what this basically is that we are trying to do a thought experiment of, Survivor 50 is coming up. They're all returnees. We have to figure out right now by the end of this summer who could and should be in the cast for this season. And so, what this experiment entails is that every weekday I am coming to you with someone from the RHAP network to talk about a season of the show and really analyze what are the chances, either from a memorability perspective, a behind the scenes perspective, a desire perspective, etc., that people from this cast would want to come back for a season 50. Our goal is by the end of that podcast to create a bit of a short list of candidates, one to a few, not several people that we would want to put on our ballot at the end of this great experiment for season 50. Everyone will get thrown into one big fan vote at the end of this once we're done with all 46 seasons. And then from there, we do what we do here in America, hopefully, and we vote. And we determine from there who will be the fan voted cast of Survivor 50. The hopes is it gets in front of the eyes of maybe some people that can make decisions as to who does get cast on Survivor 50. Otherwise, it's just a fun experiment, David, to go back through
Yes.
Survivor history again.
Yeah, and it is fun to look back in Survivor history. So even some parts of Thailand,
Yes.
maybe not the parts that were on TV, but other parts of Thailand. Like I've got my audience badge here from
Oh, there we go.
that was my first finale that I attended. So
Mm-hmm. Well, if you want to check out this series, again, we are going to be coming to you every weekday with the exception of some holidays. We'll be dropping in your feeds at 6 a.m. Eastern in the morning. And then if you want to check out the video version, which you can at robhasawebsite.com/YouTube, we'll also be dropping the video versions at 10 a.m. every weekday. And of course, make sure you're subscribed to not only this podcast series, but all the Survivor stuff we have going on at robhasawebsite.com/Survivor feed. David, let's talk Thailand here. Because look, the fact of the matter is, across 46 seasons of Survivor, we have had a one returnee
mhm.
from Survivor Thailand. And it was within the show's first 8 seasons, where there were only 7 seasons to pick between for 18 spots. So look, for the formality of this experiment's sake, we are going to leave this podcast with at least one person to put into this poll. But just between us and a few thousands of our closest friends, what do you think realistically are the chances a Thailand cast member would be in contention for season 50?
What did Jeff tell Spencer his chances of winning were?
And he could be as wrong about it as he was about Spencer.
That's true. That's true. Uh, but yeah, I think it's about 0.0%. I mean, I do think there's one person who could get some of our vote, some of the RHAP vote, whether they'd come back again or not. Which, oops, I said again, which kind of gives it away.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's another matter. But I mean, Jeff, it's interesting because as I went back through some of the information about this, even fairly soon after, like just a few seasons after this aired, he was openly saying negative things about it and about some of the players. And so now, have his views changed since then? Not based on what we've seen for the new era, that's for sure. If anything, they've gone even more in the negative direction, I would think. But I guess anything's possible.
Yeah, depends on, what exactly they might be looking for. And
Mm-hmm.
who we're looking at today are the, I would say, 16 cast members of Survivor Thailand. But look, let me just get this out of the way because you and I are going to break this
Right.
down sort of in phases. I'm just going to do the formality of saying that there were a top two in Survivor
Yes.
Thailand, but we could sort of move past it because one of them is deceased and one of them killed a dog.
Yeah. I mean, that pretty much sums it up. I mean, again, Brian, once again, Jeff was outwardly saying that his game was so sleazy that you felt like you needed a shower after watching him play. Um, and then in the game from both of them, we saw sexist comments. Brian was the only Thailand player not to attend the Survivor 10-year anniversary party.
Oh, interesting.
I went to the Amazon finale and found a way, to get into the parties that I learned after Thailand, it's not just the finale, there's parties too. So you got to find a way in. And a lot of the cast were there. Brian was not. So I think right from the get-go, yeah, I mean, are we declaring it right off the bat for Brian here?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay,
Yes,
because
I'm firing that off like a crossbow shot. There's no way this man is coming back whatsoever to this show. Both the fact that A, he's a criminal, and B, also additional to the fact that I think Survivor there's a very good chance they don't really want anything to do with Thailand, given a lot of the negative stuff around it, given the fact that the strategy itself was a bit rote at that point, given the fact that maybe with a few exceptions that we're about to get into, this cast doesn't necessarily pop in a certain way. And Brian was, while a villain, I would not say a charismatic villain in the way that a Richard Hatch was 4 seasons prior.
Yeah, Jeff refused to consider him for Heroes versus Villains. So if he wouldn't consider him for a season based on villains, I don't think we're having him come back now.
All right, well, let's move on to some brighter prospects here. Let's talk about quite literal brighter prospects because they wore golden merge buffs. It's the people who made the merge with one exception. Let's talk about the jury of Survivor Thailand. So we have, there we go. There's that Chewy Jai buff we know and love. So in reverse order of finish, we have Jan, Helen, Ted, Jake, Penny, Ken, and Aaron. Of course, the last 4 members being part of the Suk Jai culling that extended with the fake merge that we'll get into. And then, of course, 3 members of Chewy Gone. I'm going to start to sort of dip around here, David, and talk about some likelies here. Maybe we can gloss over other people if we want to. Let me talk about someone who I do think could, if there was anybody to pick out of Thailand, could stand a chance of showing up. And I'm just going to bring up a picture here to talk about her because I think you have a personal touch with her. Let's talk about Helen.
Yes.
Here. Let's talk about Helen Glover, the 4th place finisher. I would say, granted, it's a bit of a low bar, but a standout of Survivor Thailand, both in, her kind of dry way of talking through the game, infamously her storyline with Jan when they paddled out, couldn't find their way back to shore. She said if she had a gun, she'd shoot Jan first and herself second. And then she ends her Survivor career at the moment on a really interesting note in that she was bringing that Sue Hawk energy for the first time in a couple of seasons where she gives some pretty infamous final words, break a leg, I mean it. Clearly very angry at Brian in particular for the betrayal at the Final Four. Does still vote for him. But David, what do you think the chances are of whatever Helen's involvement might be from either side?
I mean, it's probably not a good chance. I mean, Jeff also said that these were the least likable Final Four ever. Now, I do think that was heavily balanced with the two that we saw already, because I don't think Helen was unlikable. And, we'll talk about Jan. I don't think Jan was unlikable. Uh, so I, I do think, Helen, I mean, she's 69 now,
Nice.
but I bet she's a badass for her age. So I wouldn't mind seeing her again now that she, in theory, could have watched all this time of Survivor and understand more of the game, and that you don't just trust Brian or whoever. Uh, I don't think it's very likely, though.
I mean, yeah, we are really kind of grading this on a curve, right? Because as we
Hmm.
talked about, it's unlikely that any of these people make it on. But that's the entire purpose of this survey as well, is that, again, it's a wish list. Maybe there's some
Right.
people that would be looked over by production that we want to shine a spotlight on. So, to your point about what her opinion is. So, Helen was on Talking with T Bird. Granted, this was 5 years ago, May 30th, actually, to the day that we're actually recording this,
Wow.
2019. First off, to your point about Helen is certainly up there. How's she doing? She certainly did not provide a visual, but she said that she's like going on hikes all the time. I believe she resided in Hawaii at the time that she was filming this. She had recently retired alongside her husband Jim, who we saw
Hmm.
on Survivor Thailand, and another great Helen moment when she essentially like bullied her husband to win the loved ones challenge so he could visit the camp. But when asked about if she'd want to come back, she did say yes. I mean, she has
Hmm.
claimed that she was in the running for All Stars, and so it was something that she clearly wanted to do. Now, look, she was feeling okay with the idols and stuff. It wasn't necessarily like an aversion, which does also imply that she had been watching Survivor maybe on and off, but still up to that point on a recurring basis. I don't know if she necessarily would be the person to blanch at the structure of a new era, assuming that continues into Survivor 50. It seemed at least she was kind of comfortable with the happy medium of like the late 30s of Survivor.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like I said, I think out of the final four, she would be my top pick.
That's not saying much.
I know. It's like, uh, eh, not quite out of the jury, but out of the four. I mean, just to move a little bit to Jan.
Yeah.
Jan's 75. I don't see her coming back. She was not exactly really in the game to begin with. So I would say Helen is our best bet out of the final four, though, like you said, low bar.
Yeah, and I think Helen also, with all the love to Jan, Jan clearly was not necessarily someone who had their head in the game for
Hmm.
strategy. I think she was more so seen as kind of like the kooky character of the game. Helen, I mean, she makes this big decision point that we might get into
Right.
in a little bit, with obviously flipping on Ghandia, and had some decision points that she was making specifically towards the end of the game. So there's some there to Helen. I think more so out of any of these three Chewy Gons that would be arguably up for debate.
Yeah. No, I totally agree.
Any Sukjais stick out to you here between basically Jake and the children, with the young tribe he drafted, and Penny, Ken, and Aaron?
Well, Jake himself is now 82.
Woo!
So yeah, I mean, I don't really know anything about him, at this point, but 82 seems like a fairly advanced age to be coming back and doing New Era Survivor on.
Yeah, I would imagine that's not necessarily what you want to do with your time at the age
Yeah,
of 82.
yeah. The one that I would, well, I have a couple.
Hmm.
One that I think is the most likely of the group, and one that would be more interesting.
Okay.
The most likely, I think, would be Ken.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
He's only 51 at this point.
Hmm.
He was a solid guy back then. He would obviously need to up his game. But if he's been paying attention, he's had over 20 years for that.
Yeah, and I do believe, obviously he was a big threat at the time. I think
Mhm.
also he ends up playing in 2002, which was, 9/11 support of the boys in blue was an all-time high, and this was like an NYC cop.
Yeah.
And so, certainly there is that sort of bellwether support that he had in the moment. I do feel like if you're listing out the cast members of Survivor Thailand, I don't know. Ken might rank in the double digits,
Yeah.
if not low double digits. So I think lack of memorability would be the thing to really detract from his returning chances.
I mean, I remember him for a couple reasons. One, I met him at one point. Two, just the whole situation that we'll get to with Shi Ann, the role he played in that. So that's mostly why I remember him. Now, the other person that I would be out of this group more interested in seeing, but I think is less likely, especially due to the memorability issue, is Penny.
Oh, okay.
She is my underdog pick because Shi Ann described her at one point as the most manipulative. And she was actually trying to play the game until Chewy took complete control. But then the problem was once they took complete control, we never saw Penny again, essentially. I mean, I just rewatched it and it was like she disappeared completely. So I rewatched it for the Survivor Countdown when we did that. That was just a few years ago. And as I was rewatching now, I had forgotten Penny. So that's not a good sign.
I mean, listen, pennies are often forgotten in Change and Survivor seasons.
Yes. So, like I said, if we were just going on, it would be interesting to see her play again, considering she was actually, trying to play at the time. Then, yeah, I would say her. I would imagine that if we actually put her in the poll, people would scroll through and be like, who?
Yes. They think this is some sort of AI constructed Survivor player. I mean, also the fact that she was clearly supposed to be cast as like Nalia 2.0, or I guess at this point, like Colleen 4.0. And so it just kind of blend together a bit.
Well, I think that was Aaron because Jeff said on the very cringy reunion that she was supposed to be the hot girl of the season.
Ah, yes. And as we know from Bryant Gumbel, though I don't, Jenna Lewis could have been the hot girl on Survivor Borneo as well. Depends on, beauty is in the eye of the beholder, David.
Yes.
Well, let us move into our pre-jury here, which might have a couple more interesting faces to talk about. Of course, in reverse order of finish, we have the aforementioned Shi Ann, Rob with 2 B's, guys, 2 B's.
Yes.
Stephanie, Ghandia, Jed, Tanya, and we're not getting pastored. It is John Raymond. But we got to start with, as has been mentioned before, so far the only returnee from Survivor Thailand. David, it's time to descend to hell. Let's talk about the She-Devil.
Yes. This is a great picture of me, by the way. But yeah, it's a good picture of Shi Ann.
I mean, listen, selfie technology in 2002 was not where it is now.
No,
you were doing the best you could.
Yeah, this was a very new and expensive digital camera at the time.
Oh,
so,
nice.
Yeah, I mean, I have to advocate for Shi Ann. She was the first person to quote my rules on TV. When she was voted out and she said, that she made the error of plotting and scheming too much. And, then I fell off my couch. And
that's an acceleration from Sari got off the couch. You fell off the couch.
Yes. I was not expecting that. And then of course she had other memorable lines like, you do not mess with the She-Devil and not get the horns. Not to mention what we saw of her on All Stars, which I'm sure you'll talk about.
Stupid people.
Yes. And so she is 100% my number one pick. She obviously I later found out studied my rules before going out there, which by the way, Helen told me at some point she did too. So
okay.
Another point in her favor.
This might be a Bloomberg sanctioned shortlist here.
Yes. And so, I don't know that she'd want to come back again. She may well say my life is fine, but I would want to see her back. She is my number one pick for this season.
Yeah, so to that point, Shi Ann also did a Talking with T-Bird interview. I want to say that was also in 2019. Let me check really quick. September 19th, 2019. So Shi Ann, I don't believe she was as caught up with the show as somebody like Helen, But she said this here, and I believe she said it in her quarantine questionnaire as well with Dalton Ross a couple of years later. When asked if she would go back, she was very up in the air. She was
Mhm.
very much like, listen, on the one hand, I don't know if I would want to go Hungary again. On the other hand, like if it's in the right place, if it's in Fiji, maybe I wouldn't mind going. And so I think on this podcast, David, we really try to take, if they don't say no, then we're going to essentially include them in the running here.
Yeah, I also think, I mean, she brought up, and I was surprised when I was watching this to see Survivor actually airing, the fact that she brought up her treatment as a minority,
Yeah,
which
but
was
Shi Ann, of course, the first Asian American
right.
contestant on Survivor.
And so maybe she would look at the changes that have been made and say, wow, I won't be the only one out there.
Yeah, that's true as well. Certainly, I think felt very minoritized by her
Mm-hmm.
tribe in particular, where she was the only minority. And so, yeah, I mean, Shi Ann certainly brought it in All Stars. This is a podcast that Rob and I will get into later on. I wouldn't say, obviously, Shi Ann was the biggest question mark in terms of casting in All Stars. It was more so a like, at least my feeling in the moment was a bit like, I get it, but also as a bit of penance for like, sorry, we screwed you with the
Oh,
whole
yeah.
fake merch twist. Here's an all-star spot.
Yeah, we were saying that at the time. We were absolutely like, "Oh, okay, that's why." I mean, obviously, I loved it, but the biggest question mark on All Stars was the winner. So,
Yeah. So that being said, she did make a good cutting
mhm,
through the game. She contributes to what I would say is one of the few spots of positivity, specifically in that post merge when she wins, when it rains, it pours, and
mhm,
basically yells, "I'm not going home." Infamously after beating Rupert there, she still does become the last person from her alliance standing, but still makes a pretty good, cut into the game in sixth place. And hell, she gets a car out of it too, David.
yeah, yeah. So, and if only they would have listened to her. If only the stupid, stupid people would have listened to
She
her.
even described the eye color of the person that she was looking to vote for that night. She held up a big red flag for those green eyes and said, "The person I'm voting for will win this game." And for many reasons, they were not necessarily focused on that. And Shi Ann paid it forward by
Yes,
paying Amber $1 million by being that
yes,
fourth vote for her to win.
yeah, yeah.
So, yeah, how do you think Shi Ann would do in a modern Survivor setting?
Oh, that's a good question. Um, I mean, I think she is, and I don't remember all the details about her current job and everything, but I think even in her job, she is a very people oriented type of person.
Hmm.
And so I also think she has probably learned to pull the horns back a little bit. And so, but they're there,
Yeah.
and so I think she could I think she would be a post merge.
I also think that, listen, we talked about this with Jerry, like the sliding scale of
Mhm.
villainy
Yes.
is definitely prevalent. Like, look at what she did in the early 2000s of what would constitute what made her the she devil. And
Mhm.
it really is just child's play compared
Oh,
to
yeah.
what Corinne said about her fellow cast members as an example. So she might not even need to change her behavior that much. Like, look at how snarky the cast of Survivor 46 was to each other.
Right. Eh, yes. And most of her horns were aimed at people like Rob,
Hmm.
who deserved to get the horns. I mean, if you were to ask me who is your absolute no way pick for this season? And I know we have a lot of possible options here, but eliminating the obvious ones, it would be Rob. I mean, he also, the way he treated women, the way he was condescending, calling them sweetie and baby, and, practically strangled Clay and
Hmm.
then made fun of him. And I mean, yes, he claimed he had become a better person through it at the reunion and all that. Baloney. I mean, maybe he is now 20 years later, but no. I don't think there was ever a question. You probably weren't even going to mention his name necessarily, but no.
No, we're on a different Rob has a
Yeah.
podcast. Rob
Yes.
with two B's has a podcast. It'd be a
Yeah.
completely different animal.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Well, the other name that I want to bring up here, I'd be remiss not to, considering how much the Bring Back Ghandia
Yes.
campaign has followed us from what I have gleaned, David, like from the twilight days of Survivor Sucks over to Twitter now a bit, probably bled into YouTube as well. Ghandia, of course, the fourth boot from this season, unfortunately embroiled in one of the bigger controversies, especially in retrospect, what was sort of unaffectionately referred to as Grindgate at the time, which was the entire conflict between Ghandia and Ted. Very, very bad in retrospect, just given everyone's reactions to it, the way the show portrays it, etc. And what I have been so happy about is that RHAP has given Gandhi these opportunities to sort of put herself back in the spotlight. Not only did she do a Talking with T-Bird, David, I didn't remember this until I looked it up. She was actually on a couple of feedback shows with Rob for Survivor 41 and 42.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, she is, right after Shi Ann, she is my number 2 pick for a returnee this season. I mean, just the way, like I said, rewatching it, she was so wronged in the edit and even worse in the reunion where, I mean, they piled it all on her. Jeff heaped it on her basically. And, yet she still loves the show. And so I say, bring her back. Let her show what she can do. And yeah, give her a chance.
Yeah, I mean, also, she is an absolute firecracker. I seem to remember, I think she guested on at least one 90 Day Fiance podcast as well around the time that Rob and Puya were starting that up. And she was just like absolutely on fire. Like, she's that personality where when she talks on a podcast, you can understand why she got cast in the first place. And unfortunately, she kind of got thrown into this big situation that ended up not only casting a very negative pall over her time in the game, but also kind of spelled her doom as well in the end, much like they did not spell Gandhi on the parchment.
Yeah, I mean, there was nothing good about that situation. It was all handled poorly at the time, even worse at the reunion. So, yeah, bring her back. Give her some redemption, even if she goes out first vote.
Yeah, she knows the game clearly, right. And especially she knows the new era, which we certainly cannot say about some of the other people we are putting on this list. I mean, the tough thing and what it's going to come down to for our short list is like, this is incredibly unrealistic.
Yes.
And what it's going to come down to with myself and my guests, depending on what our sort of temperature is like, how much are we fan fictioning it? Rob, turned down Sue and Colleen being on it because they would not be people that would get brought on for a season 50. Ghandia definitely would not be. I think between the fact that she was a pre-merger from a very early season, who also has a controversy attached to her name that the show would rather not remember, is 3 strikes and you're out. But David, how much do we want to make dreams come true right now?
I think we put her on the list and we let the fans speak. And then we tag Jeff Probst and say, look, Jeff. And then he ignores it because, he's Jeff. But I say we do it.
All right. Well, listen, I'm here for the chaos. So I'll put Ghandia on the list. Yeah. Why the hell not? For the 90 Day fans out there, Ghandia Johnson on the list. Shi Ann, I imagine we probably both would want on there as well.
Yes.
I think she would be probably the best returnee from this season. I think the last one that would be up for grabs from my perspective would be Helen.
You're forgetting one person.
Oh.
Well, not person. One character. Megilla the monkey.
Oh, God. Is that monkey? That monkey's probably dead by now.
I don't know. I didn't look up the lifespan. I didn't know exactly what
Come on, David. You're so good at your research.
I know. I mean, he wreaked havoc at camp. He stole food. He was definitely more fun than some of the cast members.
What about Chewy Gal? Should they bring back Chewy Gal? We did have the giant 500-pound gecko in Survivor 46. True. It kind of felt like Chewy Gal's pet. Let's go from Chewy Gal to Chewy Gal. What do you think? What is your pulse right now on if we should put Helen on the short list?
I think that it is unlikely Helen will get many votes. But if we're putting a third person on, it's got to be Helen.
That's a big if. We don't need to.
Yeah.
We can put
Right.
forward, only a couple, or we could
Mhm.
put forward a bunch. I don't think we'll go that far. I think it's mainly between 2 or 3. I feel good about Helen, but something does
Yes.
feel weird to me about putting forward 3 people from Survivor Thailand. I'll admit to that.
I mean, like I said, I'm automatically leaning a little towards her because she did say she studied my rules beforehand.
All
But
right, you know what?
uh,
You know what? Let's make it then an official Bloomberg sanctioned list.
all
We'll
right,
put Helen on there. To your point, listen, we'll see where these 3 finish,
right.
but the Thailand lover officially gave off his 3.
Well, let's not.
Yeah, I was gonna say I won't assign you that label, but
Yeah.
we have these 3 musketeers, these 3 women,
Mhm.
and Helen, Shi Ann, and Ghandia. They'll be on the fan vote. Let's see what people do with them.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're welcome. Bring back Ghandia supporters. We
That's
made it
right.
happen, or we're one step closer, I should say.
Right. Right.
David, anything else you want to say about Thailand? I don't know. I hope for your sake this is the last time you have to talk about this season in some way, shape, or form. 2 times is maybe 2 times too many.
I mean, I'm just waiting for the next time there's a journey through Survivor and we do the rankings again, and so I'll be happy to volunteer myself as sacrifice once again.
All right. Well, so this will be the last podcast of this week. We are taking the weekend off to rest and relax, but we are coming back on Monday for a good old fashioned battle of the sexes for the aforementioned reunion that David made his way into,
Hmm.
Survivor the Amazon. It will be myself and Shannon Gus, who is currently my co-host on the Summer Survivor series, but is my co-host in all things shenanigans when it comes to Survivor. I would say we're going to figure out who to put on the shortlist from Survivor the Amazon, but really the question is going to be who's going to join Rob on this list.
Yes, yes. I'm glad you're just being forthright about that.
And I do mean Rob with 2 B's.
Yeah.
All right, David, this was so great. Thank you so much. I feel like it's very rare that we get a Bloom and Bloomberg crossover.
Yes.
I'm assuming everyone who mixes us up is going to get even more confused
Oh
as to
yeah.
what's happening.
Yes. Yes. They're going to be like, wait, they're on. It's like Mo and Liz on the same screen.
Yes, exactly. I love your socks, by the way, David. So, anything you'd like to plug right now? You are always making it busy on social media.
I am, and so I'm at David Bloomberg on Twitter. My videos, which by the time this airs, probably will be out of Survivor 46 videos, but you can
Oh no,
go back
it's
and
a never-ending well of content right now, David.
well, I try to avoid some of that content, but uh, you can find all of my content on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok is at David Bloomberg TV. I'll be doing some flashbacks. I've got some Thailand videos ready
Oh,
to go. I'm just waiting for this podcast to drop. I didn't want to give
okay.
it away or anything. So
I had a feeling. I don't know if people are waiting with bated breath when this project was announced to find out who would be recapping Thailand, but remain that suspension of disbelief
yes,
until next
yes.
Friday for this thing to happen. Well, thank you, David, for coming on and chatting with me. This was such a great time. Again, make sure you don't miss a beat of this coverage. Make sure to subscribe. Rob has a website.com/survivor feed for the podcast. Rob has a website.com/YouTube for the videos. Let us know your thoughts. I'm sure you have plenty at this point. We officially, as I mentioned before, are finishing our first week of this wildly ambitious experiment. I have had so much fun getting to do it so far. Full disclosure, we sort of pre-recorded these, so I have no idea how people are responding. I hope it's favorable. It's a fan vote. Probably not. But for those of you
Only
that are
positive.
yeah, but for those of you that are liking it so far, we really appreciate the support, and we're going to keep on keeping on as we start with Survivor the Amazon on Monday with Shannon Gus. Thank you all so much for listening. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.